Hey everyone, Ryan from Cycling 101 in Canmore once again. Today I wanted to chat a little bit about pedaling dynamics. So lots of questions, comments, and things surrounding pedaling dynamics. Like let's just define pedaling dynamics before we even get started with this. Pedaling dynamics for me when I think about it is how we push on the pedals to create different results. So obviously, if we're just pushing down on the pedal, we're going to get a certain result. If we're actually using, as close as we can to 360 degrees of the pedal stroke, we can achieve other things. We can look at pedaling dynamics as being whether or not we are physically clipped in and attached to the pedal, or whether we're just using like a flat shoe pedal combination as well. We can also look at what we call Q factors, so the width of the spindles and where your feet sit in relationship to your hips. And we can also look at the relationship of crank length, so the varying degrees of crank length that we can have. We can also look at chainring size that affects things, whether it's a 1x12, 1x11, 2x10, whatever the setup might be. Pedaling dynamics will definitely change. So let's just go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here and kind of move a few things around. So Q factor, let's start with that one. Q factor is really interesting. It's something that's come kind of more full circle in the last kind of decade with the evolution of fat bikes. The bottom bracket and the spindle where the crank's attached have actually gone a little bit wider. And because of that, when you're sitting on the bike and your feet are on the pedals, you kind of have your hips here and you kind of triangulate a little bit down to them. For some people, that can be a real nuisance if they have really narrow hips, or if the insertion of their femurs into their hips are a little bit tighter, or maybe their knees bow in. That can cause some difficulty around like the hip socket, or around the knees, or even the ankles. So Q factor is one of those things that you'll find a little bit different between your regular, let's say, like fat bike, and then your mountain, road, and gravel bikes are all kind of roughly the same. So if you're having issues with any of those places and that I had just mentioned, and you're riding a fat bike, could be something there in the Q factor that you might want to look at, maybe adjust. Maybe it's bringing your feet in closer on the pedals, cleat placement, that kind of thing. So the next little thing I want to kind of go down and help dismiss is the whole crank length myth that's kind of always been out there. Companies like Shimano, they'll do like 165 mil crank, a 170, 172.5, 175, and I think they even go up to like 180 with Shimano. All of those different crank lengths, it has actually been scientifically proven that after 1 week of riding a specific crank length, you really don't notice much difference. There isn't much difference physiologically that you notice, or power-wise. In the interim, if you were to use like a 130 mil crank and then go to a 180, you might feel, a little bit of a discrepancy, but most of the cranks that are on the market right now on ladies' bikes are like 165 to maybe 172.5. And then most men's bikes are between like 170 and 175. So those 5 mils back and forth, not really all that big of a deal. The only time we would actually see a crank length getting much longer, like into that like 180 kind of range, might be on a single speed, where standing up and using leverage is kind of more of a skill and something that might affect the pedaling dynamics that are there. So yeah, just kind of crank length in a nutshell. Nothing to really ever get too worried about. Personally, I have bikes that have 170s, 172.5, and 175. I can't tell the difference. I spend obscene amount of time on bikes and have over the years, and really can't discern it. It's just all gonna be the fact that your seat needs to be the appropriate height. So you don't ever want to measure your seat height outside of that crank length. You want to make sure that it's always like where your bum sits, right down to the center of the spindle, and that kind of just takes care of that little discrepancy that might be there. Let's talk about clipped in versus flat. Read some interesting articles where there was some studies where they had cyclists with flat shoes and flat pedals and then clipped in as well. And they kind of came up to this conclusion that there wasn't a whole lot of difference in power generation or peak power in the short term. And I can totally see that. I know for a fact that I could probably mash on some flat pedals using the big movers, the big quads, and get myself, 90 minutes of some decent power numbers. But I think really where we need to go with this whole understanding of clip versus flats is like when you have 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour, multi-day endeavors where we're starting to look at human physiology and how we actually push on the pedal. So when we push on the pedal with just our flat pedals, we're predominantly quads. Some people kind of get a little bit of that, like that hooking kind of at the bottom, where you might include a little bit of calf or Achilles type of stuff. That in itself for 60, 90 minutes can be okay. Personally, I know that people who or know of people who have developed some issues in and around the calf and Achilles area from trying to do that with the pedal for prolonged periods of time. Personally, I like to be clipped in. I really think that it's a really great even distribution of muscular power. So I think of it like a truck. And it's got like 8 cylinders, right? So if I'm firing all 8 cylinders in a truck, it's going to move and have a lot of power, a lot of torque. But if I take 6 cylinders and I pull the spark plugs and I'm left with 2 cylinders, which would predominantly be just like the quads, I think that the truck might move, but it's not going to go very fast. It's not going to have a whole lot of torque. And over time, you're just going to blow up those 2 cylinders that are firing. The other 6 aren't really contributing to the effort. So I like to think of it kind of with that analogy and thinking about, moving efficiently as opposed to just tapping out. So some of the studies and stuff that I had read seem to be very condensed, very short amounts of time that didn't really experiment with the longer durations. Then there's also in that same kind of breath is, a lot of you guys are bike packers and do extreme distances. A lot of folks doing those things, even very successful ones, swear by a flat shoe pedal combination. And there are personal preferences, like there's no right or wrong with any of this stuff. But I also know in the bikepacking world, there is more variables to take into consideration, like the amount of time going from, like a 5 or 6 hour a day, you could be riding for 12 or 14 or 16 hours, which I could see there being benefit to being able to move that foot slightly around or after side to side to change up the way the musculature is firing to prevent hot spots, that kind of stuff. So there is a little bit of, kind of gray area there as far as efficiency and muscular power versus the injury prevention, overuse kind of stuff in certain, categories. So all things to definitely consider. If you want kind of the best of both worlds, a pedal that's flat on one side and you turn it over and it's clipped on the other, can also really help. Shimano does one, and I think Crank Brothers does one too. But watching that, getting good cleat placements and making sure that the person who installs your cleats actually has a good assessment of your physiology, how your legs line up, what your gait looks like, whether you're externally or internally rotated. That's a really a key point to make sure when you're setting up the cleat and pedal interface. Very, very important. Let's move into indoor cycling and pedaling dynamics. Really, really cool conversation I've had with lots of athletes, lots of people that I work with, about one-legged drills on the trainer. I personally think these things are money. They're absolute gold. I do them myself quite often and have done them probably for almost 20 years just on the trainer, teaching indoor cycling classes to athletes and that kind of stuff. Just a way to set it up is, warm up for 5 or 10 minutes with both legs clipped in on whatever you're riding, road bike, mountain bike, cross bike, doesn't matter. Get your legs warmed up. And then what you want to do is you want to go in a fairly light gear on the bike. So light resistance, probably 100 watts or less, you know, depending on who you are. And what you want to do is you want to start with one leg clipped in and the other foot kind of dangling or kind of pushed back or stuck on the trainer. And what you want to do is you want to keep your posture nice and neutral, nice and relaxed with the hands and the arms. And you just simply want to go through the pedaling motion. Now, while you're going through the pedaling motion, there's a few cues and a few tricks. What I like to do is I like to ignore my quads. I try not to fire the quad muscles because the weight of your leg alone as it comes up and around is enough to kind of give that little bit of movement that we're after. What we're really trying to do from a side perspective is to get the hamstrings, the glutes, the calves, and all of the other major movers and accessory movers helping the quad. So what I like to do is start off maybe with 30 seconds on the right side, and then I'll take the other foot, clip in. Then once I'm clipped in there, pull the right side out, and then do 30 seconds on the other side. 30 seconds is a good one to start. I like to build up to a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes over time as your legs get stronger, or sorry, I shouldn't say stronger, more accustomed to a nice round pedal stroke. Because the objective here isn't to generate big amounts of power. It's really about taking that connection that the brain has to have with the leg and making sure that all those muscles are firing in the proper sequence. Once you have that nailed down and you put both feet back on the pedals and you start pedaling, it's almost like 80% of your legs got a wake-up call to start playing and start participating in in the actual pedaling of the bicycle. So really, really good. I like to use my ears. I know you can't see them, but I like to use my ears when I'm doing this. I listen for that clunk. So the freewheel on the bicycle, if there's a stoppage or a gap, it'll clunk. So what you want to do is you do want to have a nice slow RPM. Like you want to go maybe 40, 50, 60 RPM, like really nice and slow. And all you want to do is you just want to keep tension on the chain the whole time. So what that's going to do is it's going to fire all the muscles in the right sequence. If there's gaps and you're hearing clunk, then you need to slow down the pedal stroke and just get it to come around. And then as soon as you get that feeling or sensation that you're actually doing a 360-degree pedal stroke, you can pick up that RPM just slightly, but not until you actually can get it to go 10, 20, 30 revolutions without that clunk. Most people will find that their dominant leg is way worse than their untrained leg. So if you kick with your right, you'll find that your right leg is probably a little less compliant because it's wired to the leg already with a whole bunch of shortcuts in there. And so what the one-legged pedaling does is actually helps to refire all of those shortcuts, or eliminate those shortcuts by refiring the proper sequence to that leg. The opposite leg, like I kick with my right, so my left leg tends to be fairly compliant when I do one-legged drills because it's a very conscious effort thinking about it. You will find these drills challenging, and I would say spending 10 minutes in an indoor session. Anytime you're starting off an indoor session, 10 minutes of warm up, 10 minutes of one-legged work is kind of ideal. If you can do 15 or 20 minutes, oh my God, you'll have a completely different pedal stroke in just a matter of a couple of sessions. You'll feel it. You'll feel addicted to it because it's, like I said, it like wakes up all of those other muscle groups, and it just makes the workload on the quads feel like it's 50% of what they're used to having to turn. If you're going to do like an FTP test, or you're going to really put in a big effort, you're going to go on Zwift and go for 2 hours and really try and hammer it out, make sure do a good comprehensive warm-up and some one-legged pedaling. And I guarantee you, if you couple that with a good environment, with a good fan and some fresh air and good hydration and stuff, you'll knock it out of the park. So yeah, that's kind of some of the details of pedaling dynamics. Share this with a lot of people kind of one-on-one, but that I'd put this out there so that more people can kind of just have a little food for thought whenever they're getting on the trainer, and maybe take that distraction that the trainer or smart trainer offers and maybe put a little bit more structure into it, just for 10, 20 minutes a session, and it make a world of difference, I guarantee you. Well, that's all I wanted to chat about today as far as pedaling dynamics. Look forward to chatting with you guys next time.